firstly, I want to, and you can get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.com or at gbnews on Twitter. But firstly, the Home Office has made a decision to temporarily relax visa rules to enable more overseas builders and the like to come to Britain to work. That means bricklayers, roofers, carpenters, plasterers are all welcome after construction workers were deemed to be in short supply in the UK. This comes, of course, just weeks after net migration was recorded at record levels. So there's quite a lot to get stuck into here. I've had a look at the list of shortage occupations, and it seems to be a recruitment website, Alan. We've got shortages in absolutely everything by the looks of it, from scientists to artists to ballet dancers to choreographers to welding and now construction workers. Do you think when people voted for Brexit, they thought that the government would continue using migration to, well, solve our economic woes, be it labour shortages or anything else?
Yeah, well, I think that first and foremost, the vote for Brexit was one of the most important democratic votes, and those that have tried to challenge it have been anti-democratic. I also think that this is indicative of the problem we've got with this government and all opposition, actually, that they don't have any ambition about what is really needed in terms of economic development, wealth creation and prosperity. We could have a whole new generation of builders, engineers, investment in science, investment in development. We need millions of new houses. We've got a terrible situation where young people can't afford them, and yet it seems incapable about working with the private sector and laying the foundation for those things. And instead, it wants to re-engage with the importing of cheap labour. It's completely not the right approach. And I really think that it sort of reflects a bit of the bureaucratic and broken Britain approach.
I think so too. It's not what people voted for, is it, at all? And the government seems to be ignoring it again. It wasn't too long ago that Philip Hammond went on the airwaves to say that in order to bring down inflation, we need more migrants in order to make, well, jobs, make recruitment more competitive, so therefore wages are more competitive and therefore wages go down, ergo you have less inflation. So this is a policy choice, a very obvious, clear policy choice to have more and more migration to fill these gaps and to potentially reduce wages. I didn't know, Ben, and I'm sure you did know this because you're very in the know, but I didn't know that the shortage occupation list, which is what these construction workers have now been added to, enables employers to hire foreign staff on salaries at 80% the going rate. So presumably a lot of businesses will choose to hire from abroad first before even looking at British candidates now.
Of course, because you've got a cheaper source of cheap labour, haven't you? And this is the problem with people like Philip Hammond. They see economic prosperity through one lens alone, and that is whether GDP is going up or going down. And, of course, if you're ever expanding the population, you get the false sucker that GDP is growing. But really what you're doing is creating a Ponzi scheme, which eventually comes back to whack you round the head when you cease to grow through that immigration process. Immigration only works to grow GDP for as long as you go on growing the population. The minute you stop, you face all the problems that Alan identified, which is a workforce that is incapable of delivering for the British nation what the British people need. And we've had this, by the way, for decades. This is not a new debate. Government has dealt with this ever since Tony Blair came to power. His approach to dealing with the shortage of workers in the United Kingdom was to open the floodgates to immigration.
Absolutely.
And as you rightly said, it's so nice to be on a panel, if I may say so, Alan, with a fellow Brexiteer. Because normally the person sitting opposite me is sort of anti the whole thing.
I'll play the Remainer.
Don't play the Remainer. But we didn't vote for that. You know, what we voted for was domestic prosperity. At the heart of Brexit, that's what it's all about. And domestic prosperity comes from educating the workforce, having a vision for the British economy that turns on using British workers first, not giving advantages to employers to take on foreign workers. And I've got nothing against, it's not a xenophobic comment. It's just that if you're a British citizen, it should mean something. It should entitle you and it should enable you to get jobs ahead of people who aren't British.
Yeah, I think most people would agree with that. And that was a huge part of the Brexit vote. Alan, at the same time as we are looking to recruit more and more people from abroad, not just bricklayers, but all of these different occupations, we have, according to statistics from the ONS, 5.2 million people on out-of-work benefits. Now, of course, that encompasses people who are seriously unwell. But clearly, 5.2 million people in some cities in this country, you can have nearly 20% of people not working. The sums don't add up, do they? It's just lazy from the government.
I think we've got a number of problems here. On the one hand, there's a situation where we don't pay enough wages. So we don't pay enough wages because we don't make enough profits, because we don't make enough wealth, because we don't allow zombie companies to fail. We prop up zombie companies. Actually, the relative wage growth in the last 3 decades has been nominal and not good and equivalent, even if you look at Europe as partners, particularly Germany and elsewhere. We should be having much more dynamic investment, R&D. We should allow companies to fail, but then have retraining programs. This is about approach
That's interesting,
and ambition.
Because when people say, let companies fail, you know, people are horrended by the idea that you would allow a company to fail or that it deserves to fail if it's not good enough. But that's how we get innovation, isn't it? One business model fails, another pops up that's better, or the same people come up with a different business model that's better.
Indeed, and then so you have much more innovation, but then also we've got a problem, which is if you look at the benefits and you look at pay and you look at people's situation, some people make calculations and they're better off doing that than working in certain situations. Now, work should be about all sorts of things, but it should absolutely be able to pay you. And in a modern industrial economy like ours, we should be in a position where all of our workers are earning great money. Companies are doing really well. In the 70s in America, on the Ford workshop, people were getting great money. People had 1 or 2 cars in America, blue collar as well as middle class. They were getting swimming pools. The whole aspiration towards doing well is now suffocated by limits, and also we've got this culture as well, which has become endemic, and we need to transform it. But to do that, we've got to engage and inspire the public. We've got to have some good leadership, and that's about wealth creation. It's a dirty word now. People want limits and restrictions with net zero.
And I think it feeds into the debate that we've been having this week over degrees, the worth of university degrees, whether there are Mickey Mouse degrees. The Prime Minister certainly thinks there are that need to be cut back on. But lots of children, teenagers going off to university who may well have been better off doing some of these manual trades.
Which pay very, very well.
They do
now.
if you work hard.
You can make a lot of money. But, you know, Alan makes a really good point. The labour market is broken. The gap between what you can get on benefits and the sort of median wage in the United Kingdom is so close. And I'm not talking about the lower paid workers. I'm talking about the median wage is so close to what you can get on universal credit that, frankly, you might as well sit at home and watch Netflix. And that, for me, by the way, is a much bigger problem than the massive debt that the country is carrying. Because if you can't get people into work, you can't grow the economy. If you can't grow the economy, you can never pay off your debt. So when Rishi Sunak talks about growing the economy and reducing debt but controlling inflation, he's actually at 6s and 7s with himself, because his approach to controlling inflation is killing the economy. He's doing more of what got this country into the problems it's currently facing.
They seem to have been, Jeremy Hunt and the Prime Minister seem to have very much, well, fallen for the idea that you need to have almost a recession in order to bring down inflation. You need to have less growth.